I remember not so long ago I did a video, and on this video I made a special request to South African political parties and politicians. I said, guys, stop obsessing about this conflict between Israel and Palestine. I only said that because I wanted to make South African politicians aware of their position on international stage. Because if these people understand their position on international stage, they will understand that there's nothing they can say or do that will affect any change in all of these conflicts that are happening right now. So all of this bickering, picketing and marching, it's nothing but counterproductive. Israel and Palestine have been in conflict for such a long time. And the notion that South African politicians have solutions to the problems that the Israelis and the Palestinians have been battling with for decades, it makes no sense to me. The same thing can be said about Russia and Ukraine. This is why, if you remember, not so long ago, President Ramaphosa went to Ukraine and Russia, him and few African presidents, they went to Ukraine and Russia to try to broker a peace between these two countries. But that mission failed. Why? It's because the conflict between Ukraine and Russia did not start now in 2020. These people have a long history and their story is more complex than what is being presented right now. This is the same thing that is happening between Israel and Palestine. These people have a rich, long history and their story is more complex than what is being presented right now. And the other reason why I said South African politicians need to stop focusing on these wars when we have so many problems is that every time these guys take positions on these international conflicts, it always comes back to bite them. The hypocrisy on the DA and the ANC when it comes to these international conflicts is appalling. And this is the reason why I did this video today. So I want to share with you this video. It's a clip from Ambrosetti CEO Dialogue that was held recently. And on this dialogue, they invited the leader of ActionSA, Herman Mashaba, the Secretary-General of ANC, Fikile, Mbalula, and the leader of DA, Steenhuisen. They spoke about a lot of things on this dialogue, but I want us to focus on this part where they are talking about international conflicts. And I'm going to try to show you guys why these people need to stop obsessing and taking positions on these international conflicts when we have so many problems in South Africa.
Yeah. I've got two more points that I want us to explore. The first one is a bit sensitive because there is a war that is going on. And we know passions have been extremely high because people have taken certain stances towards this. This is the question on international relations and South Africa's role in it. The second point that I want us to explore last is the issue of a national interest. Does South Africa have a national interest? What does a national interest mean for the political leaders we have on our panel? So I'll start first of all on the international question. South Africa's role in on the international scene. Mr. Mashaba.
Well, I think our foreign policies must be actually informed by what is actually good for South Africa and our international partners. So it cannot just really be a one-way stream, and we have to really look at respect for human rights. We as ActionSA are not going to be associated with governments that does not really respect democracy and respect human rights, and don't really believe in free market economy and so forth. So it has to really be a win-win situation for both parties. I think South Africa, looking at it right now, one thing that we debated at length at our policy conference, our view is that South Africa has got too much representation internationally. I think honestly we don't need half of the countries to have embassies in those countries. I mean, we can have one ambassador serving 5 countries or so, instead of every time someone commits corruption here, we can open an embassy somewhere else and hide.
And I must say that I really like how ActionSA is really pushing for minimum governments. I remember even on this dialogue, there was a point where Herman Mashaba said that ActionSA, they want to only have 20 ministers right now in South Africa. And I think it will be perfect, man. If you really think about it, South Africa is not such a huge country, man. But we have so many ministers, deputy ministers, DDGs, MMCs, MCs, and all of these guys, and all of them, they are incompetent. There's no need to pay all of these people, man. As long as you have efficient people, you don't need a large team. Ramaphosa right now has a bloated cabinet, but there's nothing that these guys are doing. They have ministers, deputy ministers, DDGs. What is this? MCs, they have councillors, there's nothing that has been happening right now in South Africa with such a bloated cabinet. And I really like this idea of Herman Mashaba of pushing for minimum. I really like this idea.
That person there, we cannot operate in that fashion because it's expensive to really have all these embassies. So our international relationship is going to really be based off what is good for South Africa, and ensure that these countries respect the rule of law. We will not be associated with dictators and with countries that actually does not respect the human rights of their own countries. Not that we will interfere directly in their affairs, but we will make it really very clear. Like I can give an example that I always use. It's ZANU-PF in Zimbabwe. I mean, it's going to be almost impossible, not difficult for ActionSA to have relationships with ZANU-PF. Looking at their history, making Zimbabweans to be all over the world, including being here in South Africa, creating a massive challenge for us as South Africans. Zimbabwean people deserve to be in their own country. Got a beautiful country, lots of potential. But unfortunately, when you have a party like the ZANU-PF, which are friends of the ANC, I really find it difficult for a current government to be associated with the ZANU-PF. I mean, it's beyond imagination, But those are things that will inform our diplomatic relations.
Would you have a...
Herman Mashaba is spot on about ZANU-PF because if you, guys, ZANU-PF has been rigging elections in Zimbabwe for decades. As a result of that, Zimbabweans are scattered all over the world. Zimbabweans today are being treated as second-class citizens wherever they are. They can't even go back home to live at home. If you speak to Zimbabweans, they will tell you that we want to go back home, but the situation there is bad. So the African National Congress openly supports ZANU-PF. Even recently, you remember they had elections in Zimbabwe, and SADC mission that went to Zimbabwe to make sure that everything was above board. They released a preliminary report where they said that the elections in Zimbabwe were not credible. Despite that report, President Ramaphosa and Fikile Mbalula still they went to Zimbabwe to support ZANU-PF. So ANC supports ZANU-PF, an administration or a regime that chases its people away. But at the same time, they want us to believe that they care about the human rights of people in Palestine. If you are okay with what ZANU-PF is doing in Zimbabwe, how can you not be okay with what Israel is doing in Palestine? You can't have both. You can't tell me that you care about the rights of people in Palestine, but you don't care about the rights of people in Zimbabwe. When Russia invaded Ukraine, the ANC took the position that we are not taking any positions. We are neutral, we don't want to take any positions. But as time went by, it really came to me that they took this position of neutrality because they did not want to condemn Vladimir Putin for invading Ukraine. No one says anything about innocent civilians who died in Ukraine when Russia invaded Ukraine. These people, they don't care about the human rights of people in Ukraine, but they care about the human rights of people in Palestine. They don't care about the human rights of people in Zimbabwe, but they care about the human rights of people in Palestine. For the ANC, this is why I say, guys, stop talking about these things, stop taking positions. You are now starting to look like fools because you cannot support an oppressive regime in Zimbabwe. But you want to say that you support what's happening, you don't support what's happening in Palestine. You can't have your cake and eat it. You can't. These people, if you ask them today how many children have died in Palestine, They have the numbers in their heads. But no one can tell you how many children died when Russia invaded Ukraine. They didn't care about that. No one was saying nothing about the human rights. They said nothing about the human rights. Fikile Mbalula did an interview with a BBC reporter, and on that interview, the BBC reporter said that Vladimir Putin right now is committing war crimes. And Fikile Mbalula, instead of condemning Vladimir Putin, since the African National Congress stands for human rights, he says that you, BBC, said nothing when America invaded Afghanistan, so we are not going to say nothing when Russia invades Ukraine. So you don't care that innocent civilians in Ukraine got killed. You don't care about the fact that babies in Ukraine got killed. But today you care about the innocent civilians in Palestine. You can't have your cake and eat it. You can't tell me that you support Vladimir Putin when he invades Ukraine, but you don't support Benjamin Netanyahu when he invades Palestine. When it comes to invasions, it's either you support invasions or you don't support invasions. You can't tell me one invasion is right and the other invasion is wrong. And this is why I said, these people, man, stop obsessing about these conflicts, guys. Stop it. Because the more you take positions, the more you look like fools.
Mission in China.
Absolutely, China, it's really very important. We will respect it. But I doubt if we'll have a mission in Russia. I doubt. If I have my choice, but at the end of the day, those issues will be looked into, and, because if I look at the history of the Russians, unfortunately, it leaves a lot to really be desired. But we'll take that decision once we're in government. Actually, that's the reason why at the policy conference we've taken.
You can see even right now, as much as Herman Mashaba says that we are standing for human rights and everything, when he has to choose between Russia and China, he says, no, we will see when time goes. No, that's not how it goes. You can't tell me that as Herman Mashaba, you support the United States despite everything that the United States has done internationally. But you want to condemn the ANC for supporting ZANU-PF. Guys, these people need to stop talking about conflicts, man. This whole thing right now is starting to look weird.
In a decision, and it's part of this document, to say, look, we will remain at the moment, from a policy point of view, we will respect all the membership that the current government is into. But once we get into government, we must immediately get experts to really look at this relationship. Those that are not serving the interest of South Africa, we will obviously, I think, terminate our relationship. But at this point in time, we will respect the current membership relationships in place.
Mr. Mbalula?
National interest is about South Africanness and not elevating one group to the exclusion of the other, and then understanding that we owe our being to this country. We come from a history of colonialism, which we call it a colonialism of a special time, where the colonized and the colonizer became inhabitants. That's why we never subscribe to a racist notion that a particular race within our country must go back or go to the sea. We are a non-racial party, and we espouse that in our foreign policy. And at the same time, we believe in multilateralism and the international law. We believe that multilateralism is supreme. Nations and countries subscribe through multilateralism to preempt any possibility of war anywhere in the world. We don't subscribe to unipolar. We subscribe to the emerging multipolarism in the world and the building of regional blocks like BRICS and strengthening of regional blocks like SADC for continuity and economic development. We subscribe to peace and justice for all. We are born out of that when nations of the world came together to support us to be free from apartheid. Our approach to Ukraine conflict is guided by the international law, but at the same time, it's not just non-partisan, is a position of taking a stance in relation to what is happening there. That's one. Our position on Palestine is informed by peace and justice and self-determination of people of the world.
Like, guys, when it comes to Ukraine and Russia, you don't take any positions, but when it comes to Israel and Palestine, you take positions. I thought this whole thing was about human rights. Because if you are an activist of human rights, you need to always advocate for human rights, despite what is happening. The fact that the African National Congress never condemned Russia for invading Ukraine, the fact that they never condemned the fact that innocent civilians died when Russia invaded Ukraine, but today they are talking about innocent civilians in Palestine, is shameful. The ANC needs to decide whether you guys are for human rights or you are not for human rights. Because if you were for human rights, Zimbabweans today would not be scattered right now. In South Africa today, we would not have millions and millions of Zimbabweans. If you guys really cherish the idea of human rights, the African National Congress should have divorced their relationships with ZANU-PF a long time ago if this party really cared about human rights. But because they don't care about human rights, it's all about grandstanding. They don't care about human rights. You can't tell me that you support Mugabe, you support Emmerson Mnangagwa, you support ZANU-PF, knowing exactly what those people are doing to the average citizens of Zimbabwe. But today you want to preach to the people about what's happening in Palestine. Man, it doesn't sink well with me.
The Western Sahara, Sahrawi people, their self-determination must be guaranteed. The Palestinian people, their self-determination as oppressed people must be guaranteed. And we are not against the Jews. We've got Jews inside the ANC and who have been at the helm of the leadership of our movement. What we are against is oppression. What we are against is non-independence of the Palestinian people.
You know, guys, it's funny seeing the ANC standing in solidarity with the people of Palestine with everything that is happening there. When will the ANC stand in solidarity with the people of South Africa? The people of Palestine have the right to self-determination. What about the people of South Africa? Because Fikile Mbalula speaks like the African National Congress does everything in their power to make sure that everything is good in South Africa. And what is worse is that these people, they don't understand that their words hold no weight on international stage. No one is taking these people seriously. I don't think the Israeli Defense Force will be like, okay guys, we really need to restructure because the African National Congress has said this. No one is listening to these people. Do you think that there is anything that these people can say that will change the plans of Russia? Do you think there's anything that these people can say to change the plans of Israel or Palestine? And if these people really cared about the conflict, if these people are so against the conflict so much, why are they not investing in the conflicts that are happening in Africa? How many conflicts right now that are being fought on African land? You don't see African presidents talk about these wars that are happening in foreign countries. You don't see them talking about what is happening in Sudan. You don't see them talking about that. No, they don't talk about what is happening in Burkina Faso, Mali. They don't talk about that. But they are quick to talk about things that are, man, an average South African doesn't even know where Palestine is on the map. Why are South African politicians, especially the one who are in charge of this country, so concerned about what is happening in Palestine when our country is literally on its knees? Guys, we deserve a government that's going to say, as much as we deserve a government that's going to say, we know that there's a lot of bad things that are happening in the world, but there are a lot of bad things that are happening in our country, and we are going to put our country first. Our country is literally on its knees, and we have these people marching, protesting, wasting so much time, energy, and effort into these things. They never did that for the people of South Africa. I've never seen EFF march for anything that has to do with the people of South Africa. They don't march, the ANC don't march for anything that has anything to do with the people of South Africa. But they are quick to tell us about Israel and Palestine. If anything, these people are going to get South Africa into trouble. You heard the last time Julius Malema went in front of the Israeli embassy and said that if the EFF wins the elections in 2024, we are going to arm Hamas. A leader of a political party says that South Africa is going to arm Hamas, meaning that you're going to involve South Africa in these international conflicts, knowing very well that we don't have defense in South Africa. We are not safe as a country. Today you have Thandi Modise as a head of military. Thandi Modise. Then you have Julius Malema telling you that they want to arm Hamas. So if push comes to shove, who is going to defend South Africa? Is Julius Malema expecting African South Africans to pick up arms and fight wars so that his ego can be stroked? These people want to stroke their egos at the expense of South Africa.
We'll never sell out on that, come what may. We believe that the Palestinian state must be guaranteed, and they, alongside the Israeli state, we subscribe to the notion of the two-state solution and building of bridges of dialogue between the two. We don't believe in extremism and violence and attacking people one way or the other.
You do believe in that because you never condemned Vladimir Putin for attacking Ukraine. You never said anything about ZANU-PF and what they are doing in Zimbabwe. You never said anything. But don't let the facts get in the way of good story, eh?
The name of dealing with extremists. So the international law in this regard must prevail for those. So it guides us this position in various conflicts that erupt anywhere else in the world, as a country, but at the same time as a party. We don't subscribe to the notion that one state can be a policeman of other states. We don't subscribe to unipolarism, that one state can rule over others economically forever. And that is why we have slaughtered ourselves in these regional economic developments and blocks in the world like BRICS, which others don't like. It is important for our own sovereignty as a country. So national interests are guaranteed in the understanding that we are a nation, a very special one, diverse as we are, which is our strength, and we don't give up on that. Even when others say this is a myth, is fake, and all of that, we understand where we come from as a people. That's why we celebrate the Springboks.
Okay, thank you very much. I see you've married the national interest together with the international perspective position. Mr. Mashaba, I'll come back to you so you can talk about your international perspective as well. Mr. Steenhuisen?
Well, I think that the national interest, I mean, everything that's been spoken about so far is frankly national attributes. I think the national interest of South Africa is to get an economy that's growing so that we can lift people out of poverty and into jobs. It's not in our national interest to have the social fabric of our country put in such peril with the fact that the majority of our citizens don't have work and the majority of our young people don't have work. I don't think it's in the national interest that we have 30 million people living below the poverty line. And so if we're going to put the national interest first, we've got to look to those areas of the world where our interests lie, where jobs can come from, where economic investment comes from. And I made the point earlier that 75% of all foreign direct investment into South Africa comes from the European Union, the United Kingdom, and the United States of America. If we were to lose or turn our back on our trading partners and people who are invested in our economy, I think that we're going to imperil jobs. We're going to imperil our economy even more than it is currently imperiled. And I think that that is not in the national interest of South Africa to do so. And I think there is a problem with our alignment. There's no problem being a part of BRICS. But there is a big problem when you have situations where, on the night of the invasion of Russia into Ukraine, the Minister of Defense was at the Russian embassy raising a glass of champagne to the Russian military services. I don't think it is right in the midst of a war to be conducting war games with one side in the war. Just as I don't think it's right in the midst of a huge humanitarian blowout in the Middle East for our foreign minister to be on the phone to Hamas. I don't think that is right. And I think it sets an alignment away from where we need to be. The reality is that we are in competition with most of the BRICS countries for the sale of strategic minerals and other assets. We are in trade agreements with preferential access to markets. I don't know of a single bilateral trade agreement between South Africa and a single BRICS country. Yet we have a very preferential bilateral trade agreement with the European Union. We have a bilateral trade agreement with the United Kingdom, and we have a GOA with the United States of America. Now, as it relates to our foreign policy,
So maybe before you go to foreign policy, I just wanted to follow up on that and say, well, in markets we would say, okay, so that's historical, but where is the growth going to come from? Because while these relations are important, I think numbers, whether you are listening to the IMF or from the World Bank or from other economies, the growth is going to come from the East. Doesn't it then make sense, without alienating your current partners, to court new partners?
Of course, and so I said, there's no problem with us being involved in BRICS, but we must understand that we compete with Russia, with many of the other countries, and therefore for the sale of strategic minerals and resources. And that the real opportunities lie for us in expanding current trade agreements. Of course, we've got to always seek out new markets, and that's the point I was going to get to next.
Okay.
Our foreign policy must be rooted in upholding and taking to the world the values that are enshrined in our Constitution. And we must be consistent about that. It's no good standing up, jumping and screaming about what's happening in the Middle East, and you're absolutely silent, as our government is, on what's happened in Darfur in the last week. It's no good jumping up and down about sovereignty and respect for international law when you've essentially sat on the fence while Russia has decimated the territorial integrity of Ukraine. So you need to be consistent in these things.
John Steenhuisen is talking about consistency. The DA, just like the African National Congress, says that they stand for peace, for human rights, for freedom of speech, and all of these things. If you remember, not so long ago, John Steenhuisen went to Ukraine, and he went there and he took some videos and some pictures to try to show people what Russia did in Ukraine. So I would expect John Steenhuisen, since he's an advocate of human rights, to show the same sympathy to the people of Palestine. John Steenhuisen and the DA, they are not showing the same sympathy to the people of Palestine. In fact, the DA suspended its own shadow minister for standing with the people of Palestine. But these people, they want to tell us about freedom of speech, democracy. South African politicians need to stop it, guys. Honestly. These inconsistencies are making these people look bad. If you stand for human rights, you need to stand for human rights. If you want to abide by the international law, you need to abide by the international law. You can't tell me that you go to Ukraine to show people what Russia did in Ukraine, and you don't say anything about what Israel is doing in Palestine. In fact, you even fire your shadow minister for saying anything against Israel. So this is why I say the ANC and the DA, maybe it's time they step back from these conflicts. Maybe it's time they step back from what is happening outside and start focusing in South Africa. Because this inconsistency and this hypocrisy is making them look bad. I don't know, guys, what you think. Tell me what you think on the comment section. Don't forget to hit that like button, and the most important part, subscribe. My name is Thomas Mabaso. I will see you next time. Bye bye.